Welcome to Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and this is the space where we take a deep breath, dive into healing, and laugh a little along the way.
Think of this as your cozy corner for exploring how to feel better, grow stronger, and live with more ease.
We'll chat about everything from practical tools to soulful insights, all designed to help you connect with yourself and navigate life's ups and downs.
We've put together this Soul Therapy session series to help you to come back into alignment.
By alignment, we mean living with expression of your true self and values, feeling centered and grounded in yourself, and with an inner peace, trusting in the flow of life and your role within it.
So listen along and join in with the exercises, and let us know how you get on. Ready?
Let's do this.
Hello, welcome back to Soul Therapy. I'm Katie.
And I'm Kate, and today we're talking about long-term relationships.
So, relationships really go through a transition. There's definitely a moment at which you know whether you're in an early kind of relationship or maybe you don't see the crossover to more long-term relationship, but there's definitely that moment where you look around or you look at each other and you realize you've kind of crossed a threshold into a deeper or more long-term relationship.
And I feel like this is a shift that you can really feel when you think about it, right? It's kind of like before this happens, sometimes couples can have that conversation of, do we want to take this to the next level? Do we not? What's our level of commitment? So it's almost like just the conversation kind of indicates this new transition into a longer term relationship that at times sometimes can involve more commitment, and it also can come with higher expectations.
Absolutely. And to be clear here, we should say that we're actually talking about long-term romantic relationships, whether those are between a man and a woman, two men, two women. It's all within that romantic relationship sphere that we're talking about. So I definitely think things change a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, sometimes, with that transition, like I was saying earlier, these expectations, and the more we have expectations on our partner, sometimes the more conflict arises. And that's when communication becomes even more important than it was in the early days of a relationship, because higher expectations, maybe you're spending more time together, maybe even you make that decision to move in together.
Absolutely.
So there's more factors that are coming into play. Maybe lives are getting more intertwined, and that again involves more and more communication through issues that sometimes can potentially be contentious if not dealt with properly.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes when people have been living with someone, when they've spent many years with someone, when they've gone through different ups and downs with them, maybe they've had children together, or maybe they've had some great life experiences together, it can really feel like that level of commitment is something that they shouldn't be changing within, or it can be reflected by looking at the other person. The other person has maybe changed somewhat, and one partner is like, hang on, this isn't the person that I married, or this isn't the person that I started this relationship with. And of course, we literally all change all the time.
Yes.
The only constant essentially is change.
Right.
And so we can expect ourselves and our partner to change as we go through these long-term relationships. But sometimes it can be a bit scary, I find, because falling in love with somebody, you love them for who they are. And the idea that they're going to change can be a bit scary, because you love them as they are, for who they are, and they're loving you as you are for who you are. So the idea they're going to change or I'm going to change can be really scary for me.
Absolutely. And I think that's important for people to remember when they make that commitment is like, when you're making that commitment to be in a long-term relationship with someone, you're also making that commitment that you're going to see them grow and go through multiple different phases. And I remember reading a quote by someone who is like married for 30 years, and they said they attended the funeral of their wife multiple times in saying that my wife transitioned into so many different people throughout our marriage that it was
Yeah.
almost like a death and a rebirth. And to be
Yes.
able to continue that relationship with her, I had to accept that she was no longer the woman that I chose to marry.
That's amazing and very,
Mm.
very beautiful because it opens up the relationship, looking at it that way, for the relationship to be a springboard, not to
Mm-hmm.
suppress change in ourselves or in others, but to actually
Mm-hmm.
foster and generate that change. And to really
Mm-hmm.
trust that in that change, the right thing will happen. That with that love
Right.
is greater than any change that can occur, although
Mm-hmm.
it may not stay in exactly the same form. So
Right.
even though a transition could lead to a rift in the relationship that may or may not be healable,
Mm-hmm.
that unconditional love is the
Mm-hmm.
capacity to then love them beyond the relationship and as who they are and who they become from who you
Mm-hmm.
are and who you become.
Yeah, and when you mention transitions, I feel like, in the work that I've done as a couples counselor,
Mm,
that's when couples end up coming to see me, is when they're
mm,
going through transitions. So
mm,
transitions can be a very challenging time in a
mm,
relationship because a part of the relationship is essentially dying and it's
mm,
being replaced by something new. And this
mm.
could be going from just being boyfriend and girlfriend to being married. That's a big transition. It could be having a baby. That's a
Mm,
big one. That's a big transition, right?
mhm,
It could be retirement.
mm,
It could be the children, if you have children, moving out of the home,
leaving the nest.
leaving the nest.
Mm,
And what I notice in my work is, yeah, it's in those transitions when couples either kind of part ways or
mm,
they're able to mend and make it through.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really very much down to the communication that we have as
Mm-hmm.
those changes occur. Can we create the space to actually sit down with each other and talk about what's going on, rather than standing in isolation, trying to interpret the other person and how they were and how they are from
Mm,
the actions that they're doing? Actually, at this stage, the relationship's probably so complex and the
mm,
situations we're going through are so complex that the better thing really is to sit down and actually, quite frankly and calmly and kindly,
mm-hmm.
ask,
Right.
and just actually talk about who we are, who we are being, who we want to be in future from that standpoint, from that point we're at
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah, like really examining those hopes and dreams of
Mm,
the not only as a couple but as individuals,
mm,
right? And that's something that Gottman speaks to a
yeah,
lot is always checking in on each other is what are your hopes and dreams,
yeah.
right? To make sure that you're giving each other space to grow towards that. Or even as a couple, what are your hopes and dreams? Is
Mm,
it to buy a second home for
mhm,
retirement? Is it to be able to take the kids on a vacation? Is it to be able to go as a couple on a vacation or own a second home, right? It's like, is this relationship contributing to our hopes and dreams? Because
yeah.
if it isn't, a lot of the time that alone can start causing cracks.
Yeah, and I think just remembering that we do have all those things going on. So we have the shared hopes and dreams, but we
Mm-hmm.
also have two sets of individual hopes and dreams within that
Yes.
couple as well.
Yes.
So it's not just that the couple dreams overtake the individual dreams, it's that
Mm-hmm.
the individual dreams still need to be supported by
Yes.
the coupledom that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, people will start to feel repressed and resentful
Mm-hmm.
of the coupling itself,
Right.
particularly
Right.
if one may be supported in their, maybe being supported in their hopes and dreams, and the other feels that theirs are
Mm,
not supported.
right.
Mm,
Yes. Yeah. So those regular check-ins and really like, especially during times of transitions, is being able to communicate properly so
mm,
that I know referencing Gottman again is the
mm,
four horsemen,
mm,
right? So if in your relationship there's defensiveness, there's criticism,
mm,
there's stonewall, there's contempt, these
mm,
are the four main predictors of divorce, right?
mm,
So if these traits in a conversation are coming up again and again, I mean, the risk that there's going to be a rift that's just not repairable is
mm,
increasing every time, right? And you can see these kind of build on each other. Like one person feels criticized and the other person gets defensive,
Mm.
right? So it's up to both partners to realize when that's happening
Mm.
and to be able to stop it before you enter into that cycle.
I think it's really interesting because I often say in relationships, and now partners really often don't like this, but what
Mm,
I say is that I choose you every day.
mm,
So rather than focusing on the fact that I'm committed to you for the forever, I focus on the fact that, you know, in what I'm doing, I'm choosing you every day. And that
mm,
means choosing that person in the hard times as well as the good times.
mm.
And it means, of course, if the hard times go on and on and on,
Right.
and that person is no longer right for me and I'm no longer right for them and it's no longer aligned, then that maybe means choosing separation
Mm,
and you know, but actually the choice is made every day.
right.
And in that, I find I avoid any kind of requirement for the person to always be there.
Mm,
I avoid any kind of dulling of
mm,
the fact that they are a beautiful addition to my life, but
mm,
I don't own their life.
right.
And so we actually are in connection and in communion.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that while a lot of commitments to each other would suggest you're going to be together forever, a lot of storylines, they
Right.
finish with that happily ever after,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But realistically, when things are changing all the time,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually more real
Mm.
to, and I think it's more beautiful to choose someone every day for who
Mm-hmm.
they are in good times and bad.
Yeah.
However, I have had partners say to me that they think that feels uncommitted. So
Really?
I guess, yeah. So I think it depends on what people are looking for, really, in
And
their commitment from their partner. But the reality is we do need to be actively choosing each other every day to be in a
right.
long-term
Yeah.
relationship.
And again, and maybe that's
Mm.
like a negative response because of society messaging. Like,
Mm.
it seems like the success of a relationship is measured on the longevity of the relationship
Mm.
rather than the quality. It's like, oh,
Exactly.
that's so cute. They've been married for 30 plus years. But like, but you don't know what that marriage has been. You don't know if
Mm.
there's still a connection, if it's an attachment, if they're
Mm.
together potentially for external
Mm.
reasons, right? So to not measure the longevity of a
Mm.
relationship is being success. And I find that it's very glamorized in society,
Yeah,
right? Rather
definitely.
than, being able to recognize and acknowledge if you have a good quality relationship with someone and it only lasts a few years, sometimes you
Mm.
can grow more from that relationship
Mm.
than you ever will staying in the same relationship with someone for 30 years that you've outgrown.
Yeah, you can have supported each other to the next level and
Mm-hmm.
that relationship was still valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Each
Yeah.
relationship has its own value, I think, as well.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think also just recognizing that within the relationship, there's again those three things going on. There's that idea of is it us? Whatever's going on, whatever issue there is,
Mm.
whatever thing we're dealing with, is it us? Is it me? Or is it them? Where
Uh,
does the responsibility for this lie? And
mm-hmm.
therein lies the choice as well.
Right.
Because if it is us, then we both
Mm-hmm.
have choice within it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is me, then
Mm-hmm.
it's my action and my choice that's going to
Yes.
bring about resolution and change.
Mm-hmm.
But if it is truly them, and a lot of people in relationships will say it's them, it's them, it's them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when that's not maybe 100% true.
Yeah.
But if it is really them, then
Mm-hmm.
only they have the control and the choice over it, really.
Mm-hmm.
The only choice we have is whether to stay. So
Where to
we can't
go?
make them change.
Yes.
They can choose to change, and we
Exactly.
can talk with them about that kind of thing. From
Mm-hmm.
minor things to, you know, do you unpack the dishwasher? You know, this
Right.
kind of
And
thing.
those become the big things. Those minor
Right.
things become the big things that are like the
Yeah.
straw that breaks the camel's back in so many
Exactly.
relationships.
So it's all of
Yeah.
these things like who puts the bins out and who unpacks the dishwasher and these
Yeah.
kinds of things. So we
Yes.
can talk about these kinds of things, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can try until you're blue in the face. You
Mm-hmm.
can't make them unpack the dishwasher.
Exactly.
And so all you can do is have strong communication about
Mm-hmm.
these things.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they really are choosing not to do that, then you make your choice based
Exactly.
upon theirs, you know?
Exactly. And what I've realized is it's never just one person. With the
Mm.
exception, of course, like this doesn't apply for abusive
Mm.
relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
But speaking in, a non-abusive relationship where you have two people, it's
Mm,
never just one person who's causing all the problems. And sometimes
mm,
it's that either people are causing problems, it can just be that they grew apart and they're not in alignment. So of
right.
course there's conflict happening, right?
Or maybe one person grew and the other person didn't. That can be
Mhm.
very difficult for both parties to take, actually. When
Mhm.
I've seen that happen,
Yeah.
it's been one of the most challenging things because the person who has grown then is the one that wants out, usually. And it's the
Mhm.
person who hasn't grown that's saying, "What did I do? I didn't change."
Right.
And you then essentially that's true.
Yeah.
They didn't. They're exactly the
Mhm.
person potentially that got married in the first
Mhm.
place, or entered the relationship in the first place, but
Yes.
the other person changed, and that therefore changed the circumstance between them. That can be
Exactly.
very difficult for them to accept.
Oh, for sure. And I
Um,
think those can be some of the hardest relationships to end because it's like
mm,
relationships can be much easier to end when there's a reason, like a
mm,
tangible reason. Like,
yeah.
well, they cheated on me, or
Mm,
they are abusive, or like
mm,
something that's inherently wrong with that other
mm,
person. But when it's simply like, but we just grew apart, it can be
yeah.
really hard to call it quits because you like literally don't have a reason other than, well, we grew apart, which is a huge reason.
Mm,
But it's always easier to look for something big to justify it rather than that we just grew apart. It can be so much harder to
yeah.
let a relationship go.
I think
There.
sometimes as well people wait for someone else to change back, or
Mm,
maybe the person who has changed is waiting for the other person to catch up with them.
mm-hmm,
And I mean, I guess in some times that is possible. Someone might move at a different speed,
mm-hmm,
and so they might catch up with them. As far as
mm-hmm,
changing back goes, well, if the person has changed because they're going through a tough time or something
mm-hmm,
specific has happened
mm-hmm.
to them, then yes, they could revert to being more in line with the partner in the
Right.
future.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's about the amount of time you're giving that, and
Yes.
communication again. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
communicating how you feel about the changes that have occurred,
Mm-hmm.
then the other one partner is going to be a little bit in the dark there.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, waiting with your partner in the dark as to the fact that you're waiting, what you're waiting for,
Mm-hmm.
you can come to clarity by just
Right.
talking to your partner.
Yes.
But sometimes people fear that clarity. Because if that
Right.
clarity means letting go,
Yes.
that's not easy, particularly if it's
Mm-hmm.
not something they'd necessarily wanted.
Exactly. Right. So
Mm,
sometimes that's why certain conversations can be avoided too. It's because, like, deep
mm,
down, we know the answer and we just are not ready to accept it because it means an
absolutely.
ending. Right. And that can be really scary for people, especially in long term relationships
Mm,
when you've built a life with that person. Right.
mm,
You're just not letting go of that relationship. You're letting go of the entire life that you created, whether it's a house together, whether it's kids together, right?
mm,
So the more invested people become, generally, the more difficult it is to leave.
And I think at this point, it can be very useful to think about how you're communicating with someone.
Mm.
So, one of the techniques you can use is actually an acronym called GIVE. And so, this technique involves being gentle to start with. Okay, when you're going into a conversation, you be gentle to start with. You're interested in their side, what they have to say. You validate their point. It's their point. Even if you don't agree with it, you can appreciate it's a point they have, okay, and that they're sharing it with you. And you maintain an easy manner. We use give when our priority is to try to maintain, evolve, or connect within the relationship. It's not about getting a specific end result, aside from supporting the relationship to come to its own fulfillment. Okay, so it's a real give is a real focus on the relationship. The relationship itself is more important than what you're specifically questioning about. So we're being gentle, we're being interested, we're validating what they're saying, and we're maintaining an easy manner. And you can see that this is very, very different from going in all guns blazing. Yeah, this is a different approach, and that's because it's identified the relationship as the most important thing. So I know in the past I've had times where for some reason I'd identified something other than the relationship as the most
Mm.
important thing. I
Mm.
mean, there were moments when this was probably a true alignment with my own
Mm.
values, my own
Yeah.
non-negotiables.
Yes. Yeah.
So when I was looking for the truth from someone or that kind of thing.
Mm.
But generally speaking, um, we are in our relationships because there's a lot of love there and we want to
Mm.
support them. So when we go into a communication, we
Mhm.
want to foster that relationship. We want to further that relationship, deepen that
Mhm.
relationship. So
Yeah.
I think give can really help. It really reminds me
Mhm.
that actually what is important here? Is
Right.
it important to be right? Or is it
Yes.
important to connect?
And it's kind of like that idea of pick your battles,
Yeah.
right? And you can choose to pick your battles based on, is this a non negotiable for me? Is this a value?
Mm,
Does this have such a deep meaning to me that
mm,
there's no way I can compromise
mm,
or put the relationship above it because it's ingrained in me. It's a part of me. It's a
mm,
value,
mm,
right? And that, just asking that simple question can be really helpful. And then
mm,
on top of that communication piece, and like you said, choosing to value the relationship
mm,
sometimes instead of choosing to be right,
mm.
is also the idea of self sabotage in
Right.
relationships.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I've dated people and kind of been in relatively medium to long term relationships with people
Mm-hmm.
where I've kind of wondered, are they trying to act really awfully to make me get to the point of
Right.
leaving them?
Yeah.
I mean, I've actually asked that question, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, are you doing all of this because
I wanted to
so
break up
I'll
with you.
leave you?
Yeah. And
Um,
what was their
yeah,
response?
they said no, but I
Mm.
think that maybe the deepest part, I mean, the relationship did end then later on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe more the depth of it, maybe they didn't understand that was what they were
Mm.
doing, was that they were ready to be
Mm.
out of the relationship. But
Yeah.
yeah, so self sabotage can either be active like that. I think of that
Mm.
as more of an active self sabotage, even if they
Yes.
don't see it necessarily,
Yes.
still actively created. But there's
Mm-hmm.
also a kind of more kind of subtext of self sabotage, and
Mm.
that's, for example, focusing so much on the idea that someone is cheating that you start going through their phone or their
Ugh.
messages or this kind of thing. And that
Yes.
actually, that level of distrust and that action in itself
Yeah.
makes them uncomfortable around you, which
Yeah.
leads them to look for someone else they do feel more comfortable with.
Exactly.
So there's this
Yes.
kind of self sabotage, which is actually propagating that
Mm-hmm.
which you didn't want to happen in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And it sucks when people start behaving like that, especially like this.
Mm,
Remember, reminds me of a relationship I had where
mm.
the relationship was going so well, and then the person wanted the passcode to my phone.
Right,
Right. And it's
yeah,
just like, why are you self sabotaging? Right. Like, I
yeah,
could see it, I could kind of identify
yeah.
that. And then it's sometimes the other person doesn't see it as that either.
No,
Right. They
no,
don't
of course.
recognize it as being self sabotage.
Mm. Yeah, that's very
Right.
true. I think it really, and it's because everybody has their boundaries, their own set of
Mm-hmm.
boundaries that they exist within. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
they've been in a relationship in the past where phone passcodes were exchanged, and
Mm-hmm.
indeed that was agreed between them, that it
Mm-hmm.
was actually fine. That
Mm-hmm.
again is a personal choice and a personal agreement. We all
Mm-hmm.
have our own set of boundaries that we need
Right.
to communicate. We all have our
Yes.
own set of requirements, and in relationships, our own non negotiables and
Mm-hmm.
negotiables.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to communicate where we're at with it. And as
Yeah.
that changes, communicate the change.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, that person is our partner is reacting and is responding to a
Mm-hmm.
past information. They're
Right.
kind of acting, they're driving on an old GPS
Right.
and the road has
Yes.
changed,
Yes. Yes.
So it's just very important to update that GPS, update that operating
Mm-hmm.
system that they're running on,
Mm-hmm.
and just so that we can stay a little bit more cohesive, give them an opportunity
Right.
to be more cohesive.
And really asking yourself is like asking yourself, am I creating that self
Mm,
sabotage? Right? Like,
yeah,
is this something, what is the intention behind me saying this right now?
yeah.
Right? Like, what is the intention behind me asking my partner who they were with last night? Where
Mm,
is that coming from? Is that signaling an issue related to trust from maybe a past relationship that you're projecting onto this relationship. Potentially, if someone in the past had been cheated on, and now they're projecting this into their current relationship. And sometimes they can subconsciously create their own reality. Like you were saying, they create their biggest fear simply by bringing in those past wounds into the current relationship.
I think sometimes also people create their own drama so that they don't have to look at something else that's going on in their life.
Right.
So I think sometimes, for example, self-sabotage by not updating that GPS system the other person is running on, telling them what's new with you or what's changed, can actually be creating this drama so that they can nitpick, so that they can kind of have this little conflict. Maybe because there's something deeper in their life that's not going well. Maybe because there's an issue with their career or something has changed and they've realized they don't quite want life the way that they've set it up. But creating another drama to focus on instead.
Yes.
And then they can become almost addicted to that drama because that drama then stands in the way and supports like a fence. It's a protection. It's between them and having to deal with a true problem that they don't know how to deal with.
And it could potentially be that they grew up in a home with a lot of drama and they just don't know any better. They grew up with drama. They grew up with chaos.
Yeah.
They tend to repeat that now in their romantic relationships. So when these types of people who maybe grew up in a very chaotic home environment and they enter into romantic relationships and it's calm, it's like a calm relationship, they will do anything to create the drama because that's how they feel safe. They don't feel safe when there's calmness in a relationship. So, you know, sometimes these are when you feel like your partner or someone you dated in the past was being nitpicky and you're like, but I don't get it. It's probably because they're trying to create chaos because that's the only way they know relationships can be. And when they don't have that, they don't feel safe. And a human need for us is to always feel safe, right? So it's really underneath all that drama and wounding, it's that deep need to feel safe, and it's getting projected into just toxic relationship patterns and behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of us did grow up in those kinds of homes where there was a lot of drama and change going on. And so we do end up stuck in that cycle where we're trying to create drama because we don't feel safe without it. We're creating our own soap opera,
right? It's a good
and
way to put it.
then we're
It's a
living
good way to
in
put it.
And so the thing is that creating this drama, it
Yeah.
actually leaves us kind of triangulating our relationship a lot of times as well. Because what we can do is we can end up making ourselves the victim of the drama, taking our partner and making them the persecutor of the drama, and then we go to someone else to talk about it, and that other person becomes the rescuer. And so this kind of triangle can carry on, and we can actually move around it as well. Or we could place our partner in both roles. So that's a very, very kind of, it's increasingly toxic situation if one person takes on the victim role and the partner ends up being both the persecutor and the rescuer. So they will persecute, then the partner acts victimized, and then they will come in a little while later and be like, oh, it's okay, I'll look after you, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done that, it won't happen again. And the cycle continues. The persecutor and rescuer in the same person can actually be a real negative. But we do flip as well. So even though we are the victim sometimes, we can still flip and be the persecutor other times, or the rescuer. And this drama triangle is a really negative cycle actually to get into. Again, it is, you can see it in soap operas or in storylines and movies and films. You can see this kind of drama playing out, and it's very unsettling in our lives, and it's very uncomfortable. So to live within that can be a very uncomfortable thing, particularly when you don't know when it's going to pop back up again.
Right. And it causes kind of that up and down in relationships, that emotional instability that I was talking about earlier. That's like a total non-negotiable for me. Is, you know, that up and down is just, for me, that's a deal breaker, right? And this is what that type of behavior causes, is the up and down, the up and down. And emotionally, we love stability. Just like physically, our body loves homeostasis and equilibrium. Emotionally, we need that to feel safe, to be our best selves, to have the best health. So when you're in that relationship where this is happening, it's not only bad for the relationship, it's literally bad for your for your health,
Health.
for your mental,
Mm.
physical, your health in general, right? And there's
Mm.
so much research that shows this is
Mm.
the healthy relationships are directly connected to longevity, how long you
Mm.
live. So
Mm.
this literally shows how, the relationship you're in is literally impacting how long you live, right? So
Yeah.
taking a deep look at, like, is this a relationship that I want to stay in?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. It's really, our relationships are hugely impactful on us.
Yes.
I think another thing that can come out of this kind of triangulation as well is that we can bring a third party into our relationship.
Mm,
So we can kind of turn around and make a third party the rescuer, and then that
mm-hmm.
third party, then a connection grows between the victim and the rescuer,
Yeah.
which is external to the couple relationship,
Yes.
and that can gradually feel closer and closer. And I think this is kind of
Mm.
one of the directions that leads towards the opening of the door for things like affairs.
Infidelity,
Mm,
cheating, right? It's like you
mm,
have all of these cracks, the
mm,
lack of communication, the drama, and then
mm.
everything just becomes so compounded
Yeah.
that it does lead people to search for certain needs outside of the
Mm-hmm.
relationship. And I
Mm.
mean, you can see this how common it is that affairs and infidelity happen. It's one of the number one causes of divorce. So
Yeah.
it's very common to see these cycles happen and then leading to
Mm.
external affairs.
Yeah, and I think there's many different reasons this happens. It's not just one set of circumstances,
Mm-hmm.
but I think one of the reasons this can happen is because when someone goes into a relationship requiring all their needs to be met by
Mm-hmm.
one person,
Mm-hmm.
not recognizing that one person may not be able to meet all their needs,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have a healthy support system of friends and family and
Right.
other people to meet their other needs as well.
Yes. Yeah.
I think also when
Mm-hmm.
they are not really looking to meet any of their own needs themselves, so they're
Mm.
not really looking to fill their cup from within, and
Mm.
then adding in another person or an affair, that drama creation
Yes.
again can kind of
Yes.
feel good for them. Again, it can be that barrier they're putting up between
Mm-hmm.
what they really need to address in their life and what they,
Right.
if they're not willing to, they put
Exactly.
that there as another thing that entertains them, that kind of creates something to
Mm-hmm.
do and something to worry about and something to think about, because it
Mm-hmm.
gets in the way of having to think about any deeper issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it kind of ties into the whole relationship house that we
Mm,
spoke about in our
mm,
first session, right? It's like that search for external validation
mm,
instead of internal, and really asking yourself when relationships go into thinking about having an affair or
mm,
thinking about infidelity is like checking in as well on that relationship house. Like, how are things going within me? What can I do to
mm,
soothe that? What can I do to work on that? And equally, how can I develop enough confidence to communicate this to my partner? And, if you have someone saying, yeah, but I did communicate it and
mm,
they didn't change. Again, this is where the change becomes
mm,
problematic. So, okay, they didn't change and now it's back on you. Do you choose to accept this,
mm.
that they're not going to change, or do you choose to not? Again,
Right.
it comes back to I accept or I choose not to and I'm going to leave. What happens because of,
Mm,
again, how we spoke about attachment,
mm,
people are attached. So
mm,
instead of choosing I accept and love my partner unconditionally, and instead of them choosing to leave, they choose to stay. And then this is when affairs tend to
mm.
happen. And then there's a downward spiral, of course, in a broken relationship when the other person finds out. And then it's that repairing relationships
Yeah.
as well after an
Yeah.
affair.
So how is your
Mm-hmm.
foundation before it? Your
Mm-hmm.
self-love, but then like through and after it, how are you going to deal with this outcome, this
Mm-hmm.
affair? Um, I don't know about you, but for me, I
Mm-hmm.
would say that affairs are actually counter to one of my non-negotiables. So
Mm-hmm.
one of my non-negotiables
Mm-hmm.
is that someone shouldn't lie to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the thing is that affairs, by their requirement, are actually a hidden thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they require some form of deceit and some form of lying and some form of, yes, lack of
Mm-hmm.
truthfulness full truth, omissions of some kind, in
Mm-hmm.
order for them to be able to happen and be
Yes,
ongoing.
right.
So for me, it's not really so much the affair that's the
Mm-hmm.
issue. Of course,
Yes.
it's not great. I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, the main problem is that that has actually broken one of my
No
non-negotiables
negotiables.
then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, I don't think it would be wise for me to start trying to repair that,
Mm-hmm.
because even if I can repair the and understand why this occurred,
Mm.
I will still not be able to go back to a time where one of my non-negotiables has not been
Right.
brought into play. Yeah.
Yes.
So this for me, an affair would be endgame. It would
Mm.
be there would be no going back. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not the same for everybody. I
Right.
think it
And
really depends what your non-negotiables are.
right. And I'm always surprised at how many people actually stay together
Mm,
after an affair. Like, I don't know the official statistics on this, but I've met a lot of people who choose, just like in my
mm,
work with clients,
yeah,
in my personal life, friends, like
yeah.
you hear one person had an affair and you just assume they're going to break up.
Mhm.
And a lot of the time, they don't actually
Mm,
break up. They choose to stay together, they choose to work it out. Even if that one person said it was a non negotiable, which is really interesting, that they
mm,
choose to stay together. And then it's like considering, okay, this is a non negotiable, you're choosing to stay together. How can you like repair that relationship? And it always makes me wonder, like, when couples stay together, like, how repaired really is that relationship? And maybe it's just like me
yeah.
projecting because I'm like, that would always be a crack in the house. For me, that would always be a crack in the house that
Mm,
even if you put the glue over it. But
mm,
again, that's just personally me and my beliefs.
mm.
But you do see a lot of people and they do continue in their relationship and they tend to, from what I see, it looks like they can move forward
That's
with it,
beautiful, and I think
right?
it really does depend on whether
Mm-hmm.
it's like it depends whether your non-negotiable was you must not have an affair,
Mm-hmm.
or you must. I don't know. It might not be. It might be that they thought that was a non-negotiable, but it turns out to be a negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, the
Mm-hmm.
non-negotiable is the truth, the
Yeah.
trust. So therefore, um,
Mm-hmm.
that wouldn't, in my
Mm-hmm.
experience, work for me.
Yeah.
But I think it really that brings it around to the fact that what would I do if somebody turned around to me and said, I'm thinking I've met this person, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
connected, I'm thinking that,
Mm-hmm.
I want an open relationship, you
Mm.
know? So that would kind of bring around that kind of
Mm-hmm.
discussion and communication.
Right.
And I can't tell you because I've never been in that
Right. And
situation.
that's interesting
So
too,
I
right?
wouldn't
Like, we're
know.
definitely in a time now where these two-person
Mm,
relationships aren't always a thing, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah.
open relationships are becoming huge.
Yeah.
Swingers are
Yeah.
becoming huge. And like
Yeah.
all of polyamory,
Yeah.
polygamy, right? All of these different types of
Mm-hmm.
relationships. And again, I think it just, there's no right or wrong. It just comes
Mm,
down to values. What do you
mm,
value? What's important to you? What's
mm.
negotiable versus a non negotiable, right?
Yeah.
And that's up to every person to decide individually. And it's just finding someone whose negotiables and non negotiables match yours.
Yeah.
And if that works for the relationship, then that's what works,
And I
right?
think also attending couples
Mm.
counseling or attending counseling independently and then
Mm.
coming together as a couple to talk about that maybe is something they can do as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I find that usually when a couple come to me to talk
Mm.
about their issues,
Mm.
usually very quickly,
Mm.
within the first 20 minutes, I can identify why each one of them needs to talk to someone independently about their own stuff. So
Mm.
then
Yeah,
what's happening is that their own stuff is actually being pushed into the relationship.
definitely.
So maybe they've got some wounding of an issue that happened when they were in their early teens,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they have some wounding from an issue that happened
Mm-hmm.
when they were very small child. But
Yeah.
so then what's actually happening in their argument or debate within the couple is
Mm-hmm.
that teenage one person,
Yeah.
and small child, the other person,
Right?
are actually meeting and having a bit of a battle about things in the past about which
Yes.
neither of them really know,
And that,
and
yeah.
about which the other one can't solve. So I
Mm-hmm.
think then actually attending counseling or therapy separately
Yes, for
and
sure.
talking about past issues, working through them, and
Mm-hmm.
then coming together and talking about those issues and explaining to each
Mm-hmm.
other, I'm having a problem with this.
Right.
I
Yeah.
realize now it's because of this.
Mm-hmm.
Could you possibly,
Mm-hmm.
in the future, talk to me like this or not
Right.
like this, or, etc., etc.?
Yeah.
Could we
And
go forwards in a certain way?
right. And a lot of the time when conflict happens in relationships,
Mm.
it's both people regressing back to their childhood
Mm.
self. I mean, two adults should not be sitting and yelling at each other. Those are
Yeah.
the characteristics of two children,
Right. Yeah.
right? So, literally, a lot of the time, it is a regression of both
Mm.
people. Like, if one or both people aren't showing up and able to sit down calmly and
Mm.
talk to each other, they're triggered, they're acting on past wounds, and they both have regressed back to their child or teenage self, right? Because that's
Yeah.
not how adults show up and converse, right?
Yeah.
It's a trigger and you've now regressed. And that's like so common. And this is kind of when you hear, the adult having a temper tantrum,
Mm.
they're like throwing stuff around. They're no
Mm.
longer in their adult self.
Mm.
They've now regressed
Yeah.
back to their child self.
Mm.
And and having recognition of that is the most important thing, of like, okay, I'm triggered, I'm now regressing back, how can I bring myself back to a place of balance?
Yeah, and I
Right.
mean, full ownership of this. I've,
Mm-hmm.
in the past, before I grew through my understanding of these things
Mm-hmm.
and before I grew through working through some of my own past issues,
Mm-hmm.
I was the one doing the shouting. I
Yeah.
was shouting very loudly.
Yes.
And so I definitely don't hold it against anybody who is
Mm-hmm.
doing this, who is
Mm-hmm.
regressing to their past wounded child
Yes.
or
Mm-hmm.
teenage self
Mm-hmm.
and bringing that through their relationship, because I
Mm-hmm.
understand how easily that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not much fun. I
No.
recognize from standing there screaming down a phone at somebody who really didn't deserve it,
Right.
I recognize that it's not fun at all to be
No.
the not well it's not clearly not fun to be the person being screamed at.
All right.
It's not fun to be the screamer either.
No.
It's really not fun to be the
Yeah.
screamer. So, because at the end of the day, the person being screamed at can walk
Mm-hmm.
away. They
Right.
can make that choice, however much they might
Yes.
love you, they can make that
Mm-hmm.
choice to change
Yes.
and make a change in their life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are the person doing the screaming, well,
You're
you're going to
stuck with
wake up with
yourself.
yourself the next day and the day
And
after and the day after. Yeah.
yeah, and this is when you see repeated patterns in
Mm,
relationships. Like, if the same patterns are coming up over and over again in your relationships,
mm,
it's one of those circumstances where it's time to stop and reflect on
mm.
you.
Oh, yeah,
Reflect on you,
definitely.
because, like, come on, if it's like your third or fourth relationship and this has happened in the past, it's like, again, it comes back to that self-awareness and that
Mm,
self-compassion, but being honest enough with yourself to be like, okay, this is the third time this issue has come up.
mm.
What is going on within me? What wound
Yeah.
is going on within me that I need to soothe or heal? Because it can't always be the other person. And I've had to
Yeah.
personally do that. I've had to take a look at myself too and be like, wait, this is like the third time now that I've dated someone and this issue has come up. Like,
Mm.
time to sit and reflect, Kate, right? Like, time
Yeah.
to have an honest look at myself and really peel back the layers of, where is this coming from? Is this
Mm.
trauma from my past? Is this like a
Mm.
child wound? And it always is. Like, it always is.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, I've definitely actually looked into booking couples counseling for me and a
Mm-hmm.
partner, only to realize that where I'd written on the list, they do this, they do this, they do
Right.
this, they do this, to recognize very, very quickly that actually I'm the one that needs the counseling. I mean,
Right.
I'm not saying they don't as well
Right. Yeah. I'm sure you could
sometimes,
both benefit,
but
but
it's independent counseling that we actually
yes.
need. It's independent
Yes.
therapy that we're actually looking for, because
Exactly. Yeah.
it's those two wounded children that are actually having the argument, and
Right.
it's
It's not
the
even the two
wounded children.
adults.
Yeah, and it's the
Yes.
wounded child in me
Right.
that's actually shouting. It's not. Yeah.
Exactly. And this relates to our attachment styles, right? Like,
Mm,
attachment is huge in relationships, right? And
mm,
our attachment develops as children. So, if as children, so there's four types of attachment.
mm,
There's the secure, the anxious, the avoidant, and then the disorganized, right? And about 50% of people have secure, and the other 50% have one of the other three, right? So 50% of the population are walking around with attachment issues that if you don't have the awareness that you actually have this attachment issue, you're bringing it into your relationships, right? And it's really not about that relationship. It's about how you were raised in your childhood, and this attachment that you developed because as a response to your environment. And now it's being carried into your romantic relationship, right? And I know for me, I had to identify that I didn't have a secure attachment. I was very much avoidant. And now when I look back, it's so clear when I can see, literally identify like in what relationships I was avoidant and what ones I stopped and actually reflect it. And just that simple self-awareness sometimes can be enough to shift to a secure. So if you are starting to think right now, oh my gosh, I definitely have insecure attachment, it's okay. The first step is to recognize it, and you can very much choose to shift to more secure attachment.
Yeah, for me, I have a more disorganized attachment style. So I can be anxious with some people and I can be avoidant with others.
Right.
Or actually within one relationship, within one interaction, I can be anxious sometimes and avoidant others. So yeah, to recognize that in yourself is actually to give yourself back, to reclaim a lot of your power, because you start to notice in yourself when these things are coming up. And in that, you can say, "Oh, this is my anxious attachment wound. I'm not going to follow through on that text I was going to send.
Right.
I'm going to wait because this is me being anxious, and this is mine, not theirs. Yeah, this doesn't belong to the relationship; it belongs to me." And the same with the avoidant. I have great experience of both because I'm disorganized. So the avoidant is to kind of go, well, maybe they're inputting too much into my life.
To push
I
away.
push them away a bit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to respond to them this afternoon. I'm not going to respond to them today. Let them wait, and I don't want them in my life all the time,
Yes.
etc.
Yeah.
And rather, instead, I could catch myself and go, oh, this is my avoidant running away from a situation that I feel now too bound to potentially. But actually, is that them, or is it in the relationship, or is that me? And instead I can turn around and I can just drop them a text saying, busy day, I hope yours is good, chat tomorrow, and that has the same effect of giving me the space,
Right.
but without me reacting in that avoidant style.
And then there's anxious attachment, which is the person who people would call clingy. They're constantly texting, they're constantly calling all the time. And the two attachment styles that tend to attract each other is the avoidant and the anxious. And when you get those two attachment styles together, it's an absolute disaster. The anxious and the avoidant, I can tell you this because I've been in the anxious avoidant relationship where I've been the avoidant one and I've been with someone who is super anxious. And it's like this back and forth, and it's this chasing and running. And like, again, it can seem exciting, but it's really like that up and down, up and down. It's no stability in it whatsoever. And those two types of attachment styles seem to attract each other.
Well, that's what is called now in a lot of circles, twin flame.
I was thinking of that too, the twin flame disguised as attachment style.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So this is very toxic. You've got this
It is toxic.
anxious looking for the connection. You've got the avoidant running away from it, just throwing back enough grains of sand or bread just to keep them following on, keep them behind, because they don't want to lose them. But the thing is, they don't want to be too close either. And you've got this kind of this attraction from the anxious person trying to draw them closer and closer as they try to run further and further away.
Exactly.
So this can be very, very toxic.
And the interesting thing is when you take those two attachments and those people heal themselves and decide to move towards a more secure attachment, sometimes you're not even attracted to each other anymore. Like you realize it wasn't a connection, it was an attachment. So when you take, the avoidant away and you take the anxious, and these people have healed themselves and they're now operating in the healthy realm of attachment. And then those people come back together and it's not even a connection. And that's when you're like, oh, the entire time it was never a connection. It was just an attachment wound that we were projecting back and forth onto each other.
Yeah. And I think sometimes people just don't want to make any change. They get a bit addicted to that high energy, high velocity, highs and lows. I know I did. To be honest, I was a bit afraid to move out of those extreme highs and those extreme lows because I was a bit afraid to exist in the middle ground.
Calmness.
In the calmness, but I saw it as mundane.
Boring.
Because I was looking to repeat that drama that I'd had in my life before. And so it was, for me, the drama was safe.
Yes.
I knew what was going on in the drama. I didn't really understand what was going on in the calm. So I migrated away from it towards the highs and the lows.
Yeah, because that's what you're comfortable with. Like, you know, anything new is uncomfortable for us. It can feel unsafe, even if it is safe, because we're just not used to it being like anything new. It takes time to adjust to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important though to be able to open yourself up to the new. Whether that is opening yourself up to the new person that you're in a relationship with because they've changed, the new you that you're bringing to the relationship because you've changed, the new relationship you have together because you've both changed, or whether it's actually recognizing that you've both changed in a way that the kindest thing and the most loving thing you can do for each other now is to let each other go and open up to new people in your life and new connections.
And remembering it's not a failure, right?
No,
so many people think a relationship ending is a failure and they try to keep it going again, because in our society that equals success, right? So remembering that when a relationship ends, it doesn't mean it's a failure. Sometimes it can be the most loving, brave thing to do, is that recognition and just loving that person enough to be able to let them go.
Yeah, that's very, very, very true. And so really what we're saying is whatever is going on in your relationship, communication is key. So hear each other out. Make time to hear each other out. Make a time, maybe each week, maybe each month, just to sit down together and have a real chat about the relationship. This isn't date night. There should be some time to have romantic time together or fun time together too. But this is time to actually talk to each other, to be honest with each other, to hear out the relationship. Try using the give approach, okay? Being gentle, being interested in what they're doing and what they're saying, validating that as their perspective, even if you don't agree. It's their perspective, and thank you for sharing it, and maintaining that easy manner as you see how to move forwards together.
And specifically, you can specifically ask your partner, what do you need right now? You know, instead of beating around the bush, what do you need from me right now? This is what I need from you. So simply, you can ask each other that, what do you need from me right now?
Perfect. Thank you for joining us on this session of Soul Therapy.
And we look forward to seeing you in the next session.
Thanks for joining us. We'd love to connect with you live in our group sessions.
Join our online membership to spend weekly group sessions with us, where we will be talking about topics such as depression, anxiety, burnout, relationships, family problems, and addictions, as we work with you to develop your health and well-being.
In addition, this includes access to a private Telegram group, weekly actionable exercises with guaranteed general feedback from us. The 12-week membership comes with an exclusive offer of reduced price one-to-one sessions with us for the duration of the 12-week membership.
A lot can change in 12 weeks. Come and join us and jump into the life you choose.
Remember that to get the most out of these soul therapy sessions, whether the free podcast series or the membership, we advise full participation in all the suggested exercises.
Throw yourself into this fully and become the you that you have always dreamed of being.